Welcome, everybody. Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're tuning in from. We're coming at you live from New York. This is Spirit Matters with myself, Dal Grunga, and Kishore Chandra. Chitagopi's not with us this morning. So you got just us, and we're glad and grateful to be here with you, with all of our live studio virtual audience members who are tuning in on Zoom, and you podcast goers out there, wherever you're listening for. Thank you so much for being here, taking this daily check-in. If you're listening to this podcast, you're a special person. You're looking to go deeper. You're looking to think more deeply about your life. And this episode did not find you on accident. There's something here for you. It may not be what I say or what Kishore says, but there's something that the universe is bringing your way. It might just be one word that strikes in your heart. And if you're open to it, you can experience tremendous transformation. And we're doing that by reading the Bhagavad Gita, which is an ancient spiritual text on yoga wisdom and philosophy and lifestyle. And apparently what I understand is we're just getting into it in terms of the deep spiritual instructions, which take place near the beginning of the second chapter. I haven't been here the last few days, but I'm speaking as if I have. So I don't actually know where we left off exactly. That's going to be Kishore's gonna let us go. But before we launch into that, how are you, Kishore, and how you feeling coming into our conversation today?
I'm doing good. Good morning, everyone. I did yoga, asana at 8 a.m. I did like a full-blown practice,
Ooh,
and I'm like getting back into yoga version of me, yoga zone. And it was nice. It was nice to like wake up and move. So I'm feeling like awake and present and here and ready to discuss spiritual texts, the Bhagavad Gita. How are you, Doya?
I just woke up. I'm just I woke up earlier, but I didn't do yoga this morning. I We had been gone for a few days. We took a leadership offsite, you, me, and the rest of our leadership team at the Bhakti Center. So this morning I did a little bit of a cleaning and just catching up on a lot of stuff.
Hmm.
Um, and Now I'm here with you.
Here we are discussing Bhagavad Gita.
All right,
So
let's dive
we
into it.
Yeah, we left off. I'll give it just a little bit of a summary because we read text 7 and text 8. We actually read till text 13, but we're going to go back and discuss some of those texts because what we really focused on where we left off was Arjuna's surrender to Krishna, where he
Mm,
really started to understand that he might not know what is best for him, that he might need to not might that he needed to surrender to higher power, that he needed to start to see Krishna in a different way as his teacher. And we spoke about that a lot, this idea of knowing what is good for me perhaps in the moment, or thinking that I know what is good for me in the moment, but understanding that I might not know what is ultimately good for me in the long run, and that I need to look towards higher power, ancient texts, support, spiritual community and friendship, to help lift us up during those dark nights of the soul, during those dark times. Because as we saw at the end of the first chapter, Arjuna is trying to like throw so many high and lofty philosophical ideations of why he shouldn't do what he's supposed to do, right? And in our daily life, sometimes when there are things that we might not want to do or things that feel out of our comfort zone, we go into that place of like, well, like if I don't really have to do it because X, Y, and Z, whatever, right? And Arjuna was getting really high and lofty, like society, and kind of dramatic, right? Like if I do this, society is gonna crumble, right? Like all progeny going forward is just gonna like crumble. And after a while, like Arjuna realized that he just like wasn't making too much sense anymore. And he had this full-blown kind of anxiety attack where he was just like, I don't know what to do anymore, actually. And we really dove into that and spoke about how that element of surrender is absolutely necessary, because that's what allowed Krishna to say like, okay, like the mood has shifted now, like I get it, like it's time for me to instruct, it's time for me to tell you what's up, so that's kind of where we left off. So I thought we would read starting from Krishna's instructions here to Arjuna, where he starts to get into a little bit more about like the soul and the nature of spirit. So we're at text 11 of chapter 2 of Bhagavad Gita. Um, so
Let's
I'm
do
going to
it.
read that. Okay, so it says, the Supreme Personality of Godhead said, while speaking learned words, you are mourning for what is not worthy of grief. Those who are wise lament neither for the living nor for the dead. Never was there a time when I did not exist, nor you, nor all these kings, nor in the future shall any of us cease to be. As the embodied soul continuously passes in this body from boyhood to youth to old age, the soul similarly passes into another body at death. A sober person is not bewildered by such a change. Hmm. Mm-hmm.
All right, he's laying it down.
Laying it down, we're getting right into it. Transmigration of the soul.
Yeah. Did you guys discuss this in your recent
We
dialogue?
did not. We did
Just read
not.
them.
That's why, yeah, we just read it. That's why I really wanted to get back into it, because I think that this is really important. Whether one believes in the transmigration of the soul and reincarnation, or whether one doesn't, I feel like it's such an important part of the Gita of understanding the difference between our soul and our body. And in our bhakti kind of community and lexicon, you'll hear this a lot, right? Like, you are not the body, I am not this body, I am not my mind. Our dear friend Raghunath has that thing that he says, which is so sweet. I'm not the body, I'm not the mind, I'm something divine, right? It's something that he says. And it's so sweet because we can understand that on a kind of mental level. And even Krishna is telling Arjuna this here. He's having like a big full-blown anxiety attack around something very real, and he starts with this kind of like high and lofty philosophical um, instruction. So I thought it would be interesting to talk about it.
Yeah, well, there's a couple of things that take place. It's interesting that Arjuna's coming to Krishna with a very specific problem, a very specific question. And, his initial spiritual instruction um, is challenging him in a way. Um, because in one sense, Krishna could just say, "This is what you should do," and then the Gita's over. There's no Gita. It's just like it's a voice note. You know what I mean? The Gita could easily have just been like a quick 60-second voice note, and that's all you needed. Like, what should I do? This is what you should do. Okay, bye. But what Krishna has to take the entire time of the Gita explaining is helping Arjuna prioritize what's important. And I think that so much we get caught up in things, and we sometimes think we're looking for a particular solution of this particular problem. And when we get lost and get lost in the headspace and the anxiety of like trying to figure out this particular solution, that sometimes is a losing game. But what spiritual perspective does is it lets us step back and not change the problem, but see it in the context of something much, much bigger. And so our problems don't disappear or go away or doesn't discount them, but it changes the size and perspective of them. Um, when we understand a bigger picture of reality, bigger picture of ourselves, bigger picture of the world around us, bigger picture of our purpose, bigger picture of what actually brings us happiness. Because our understanding of what brings me happiness and what, the ideas of happiness and suffering are very much based off of the idea of identification. You know,
Mm.
how I identify as a person um, informs what I consider to be joyous or
Grievous, yeah, that's a word.
grievous. That's a word.
Yeah.
Grievous, joyous or grievous events. You know
Mm.
how it relates to me. I remember if you watch there was a documentary narrated by Matt Damon called Inside Job that was around the 2008 economic crisis in
mm,
America and also, globally, but particularly, Wall Street and housing market crash in 2008. And, there's one person confessing he worked on Wall Street. And it's like when 9/11 hit, the first question in many people's minds was, what's happening to the price of gold? You
mm,
know, it wasn't like how many people have died, how did this happen, how can we
mm,
get relief? There were some people, we live in New York City. Everywhere you go, every fire station you drive by or walk by, you see, a picture of the Twin Towers and list of the names of the firefighters who gave their lives in service on that day. And so, an event happened, and I know somebody, we know somebody, a mutual friend who works in Wall Street, and he was on his way to work that day. September 11 happens to be coming up shortly, but I'm just bringing it up because it's relative to this conversation. He was on
mm,
his way to work. He was in downtown when the towers were struck, and
mm,
he had went through like post traumatic stress,
mm,
you know therapy and recovery, because he was seeing people die, and he was like one of the last boats out, ferries out of Manhattan to go back to Jersey. And so, there are people, whether your business was there, you had family members or friends there, a certain response was there. For some people, totally disconnected from humanity, you
mm,
know, defining happiness by what's in my bank account, um, saw it differently. They're like, "What's the price of gold?" And then
mm,
the whole movie is about just like the unfortunate corruption of financial industries and why we found ourselves in this situation. So, but all of that aside, how we identify as a mother or a father or a business person or a doctor or a this or a that. You read the news, and sometimes the news just seems like gripping and just like heart stopping, and you're so into it. Sometimes you read the news and it's just like boring. Like,
mm,
what is this and that? Because it's not related to me. We've become, this word I've been reading recently, anesthetized,
mm,
to things, because it doesn't affect my, I'm not Ukrainian or Russian. Okay. I don't know anybody. But then I realized, oh, this person, my friend, is Ukrainian. And all of a sudden, like it comes home to me. So I
mm,
think that so much of what Krishna is saying is that what we consider to be problems, what we consider to be causes of celebration or agony, are related to how we identify in this
mm,
world with the roles that we play. And Krishna is saying that's normal, that's human, as we'll go on later in the text. But let's start all the way back at your most foundational identity
mhm,
and start there, and view all of your other identities within that context, and let that help you provide a lens through which to see, that was the, you're worthy for not for what is not worthy of grief.
mm,
And
mm,
so, it allows us to, and there is a time for grieving. And I'm going on for a while here, I'll stop. But in the first canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, which takes place after the battle of Kurukshetra, there's a whole chapter and a whole
mhm,
selection of verses dedicated towards the grieving of the Pandavas, Arjuna and his brothers and their family members, having a funeral procession and grieving and taking that time and space. So
mm,
it's not, the Gita is not a stoic philosophy.
mm,
It's just a
mm,
broadening your perspective of yourself and life philosophy so that you can navigate the ups and the downs with poise,
mm,
rather than feeling like a pinball machine that's just being crushed by
mm,
circumstances.
mm. I really love that you made a point to emphasize the fact that Krishna is really trying to take all of us and Arjuna back to our most fundamental identity. I love how you said that, because um, we've said it before on this podcast, like a Srila Prabhupada-ism of like being rightly situated, being correctly situated in this world. And that means like understanding my place and where I fit in terms of like the material world and spiritual world and Krishna and how it all kind of works together. And it's interesting because it's this, the mind is actually very easily conditioned, and once it's conditioned, especially through childhood, it's like very hard to break those conditions, right? Like if you think about like a habit that you're trying to break, and especially like a habit that goes way back, maybe it's something about your personality, maybe it's the way that you respond to things, right? If you think about how much effort it takes to change this, or like really want to change it, it takes a lot of effort. It's not like, you know, if I'll give an example. I'll give a personal example. I'm a New Yorker. I was born and raised in New York. I was actually a kid when the towers came down, and I saw them in a distance. It was really traumatic. But anyway, New Yorkers tend to be loud, and we tend to just say what's on our mind and just like whatever. And my partner, who's not here today, he is not like that at all. He's very quiet and kind of subdued and like this. And sometimes we'll get into like just, you know, arguments because he'll just be like, why are you so loud? And I'm just like, it's just, this is just what it is. Like this is just the way that I was raised. This is how we talk. This is it, right? And he's like, okay, but it's not, you know, whatever. And it's been something that I've been trying to work on, to not be so loud. And it's very hard. It's very difficult because this is something that like from childhood, it's been like ingrained into my mind, just like, yeah, like you have to be loud to get ahead, and it's New York City and you have to like, you know, make your point across. And so it's just something that small is very difficult to change. And so like, how difficult must it be to change, or must it be to realize? It takes a lot of realization. And that's why I think the whole Bhagavad Gita is necessary. Krishna really explaining this as a science, and there's so many ancient books and texts that come after the Bhagavad Gita explaining the science of really learning how to identify as a soul. And then once I've identified as a soul, starting to build a relationship off of that identification with my eternal connection to Krishna. And it's like, it's not just like a switch that I can flip in my mind. Okay, yeah, I'm a soul, and you know, I'm spirit, and I have an eternal relationship with Krishna. Great, I figured it all out. You know, it's not that simple. And so it's really lovely here. I'm going to read a bit of the purport from this verse of, you know, I think verse 11, you're lamenting for things that are not worthy of lamentation. Srila Prabhupada is saying that, as explained in later chapters, it will be clear that knowledge means to know matter and spirit and the controller of both. And I think that that's such a fundamental sentence, because it's like, we think in our societal world that knowledge means something, right? Knowledge means I went to a good school. Knowledge means I have some fancy degree. Knowledge means that like I got A's, pluses on all my exams, and I'm just like succeeding and whatever. And Srila Prabhupada is like, no, knowledge means to know matter, spirit, and the controller of both. And that's just like such an interesting, like from a spiritual standpoint, it's such an interesting turning things on our head. You know, if we go talk to a layman about this, they'll be like, what are you talking about, right? Like, no, knowledge does not mean that. Knowledge means this. And then Srila Prabhupada continues, Arjuna argued that religious principles should be given more importance than politics or sociology. But he did not know that knowledge of matter, soul, and the supreme is even more important than religious formularies. And I think that this is a very important sentence here, because we have religious principles in terms of like ritualistic religious principles. We have politics, we have sociology. Now we're living in a society where ritualistic religious principles aren't important at all. And what's more important now is politics and sociology. And Srila Prabhupada is saying, actually, the most important thing, and Arjuna didn't know this, is this knowledge, this specific knowledge of matter, soul, and the supreme. And that's the most important. And he continues on, and because he was lacking in that knowledge, he should not have posed himself as a learned man. as he did not happen to be a very learned man, Srila Prabhupada is quite direct, he was consequently lamenting for something that was unworthy of lamentation. The body is born and is destined to be vanquished today or tomorrow. Therefore, the body is not as important as the soul. And I really love this last sentence. One who knows this is actually learned, and for him there is no cause for lamentation, regardless of the condition of the material body. And I'll just end here because now I've been talking for a long time, because it's like the more that I identify with this body and what is mine and what I have, right? Like you were giving this story of Wall Street and the price of gold, the more that my lamentation is going to be like not tied but attached, like attached to that. You know, it's like the price of gold went down, I'm so happy. The price of gold went up, I'm in complete distress, right? Because this is tied to my body in a sense of what I conceive as mine, right? Or this friend is no longer my friend anymore, I'm in absolute distress, right? Or they're so close to me and I love everything about them, I'm happy, right? And so Srila Prabhupada is saying, like, actually, we need to move knowledge out of that identification of what is I and what is mine. We need to move it up. We need to understand what is true knowledge. I see that something's been going on in the chat. Loud people unite. I'm loud too. Doyal says, I was loud even before I moved to New York. Krishna.
Still working on it. I appreciate what you've been sharing, and also as I've been reading and studying this section of the Gita, I think it also the idea of how we define success, or where we believe happiness lies, plays into this conversation as well. Because where do I think I'm going to find happiness? And all of us, whether it's conscious or unconscious, explicit or implicit, whether we have stated it to ourselves or it's just this unconscious agreement that we've made, that happiness is found here. Happiness is found in a certain way. These are the elements of what creates a happy life, whether it's something related to finances, whether it's something related to relationships, whether it's something related to family, whether it's something related to hobbies, whether it's something related to body image. I believe that if my body looks a certain way, I believe that if my finances are at a certain level, I believe that if my home life and my residence is, once I get this job or leave this job, or once I get married, or once I have kids, or once I make enough money, or once I'm able to move out of this town, once I'm able to lose weight or gain muscle, or fit into this dress size, or whatever it might be, then I'll find some happiness and satisfaction, because I've determined that happiness is related to some external achievement. And what really Krishna is doing here, and what he'll call on us later as we progress in the Bhagavad Gita, why he's starting here, is Arjuna's entire anxiety is based off of no good is going to come from this. There's going to be, he's worried about, and that's why Krishna will define this equanimity between happiness and distress, and that being yoga being defined as our ability to maintain equanimity between happiness and distress. It doesn't mean we don't experience happiness, and it doesn't mean we don't experience distress, but it means we put them in context. And it means that also material happiness and material distress, because neither of those is the goal. And so it's also calling us to rethink our formula for happiness. And based off of Arjuna's previous formula for happiness, he's experiencing a lot of distress. And so rather than telling Arjuna, I'm going to just tell you what to do and solve your problem, I want to reformulate your idea of a successful life. I want to reformulate, recalibrate, redefine your idea of happiness. And we're going to start first by understanding who you are, because our search for happiness in this world is based on a misidentification. It's based on a misidentification. of, and based on that misidentification, just like a plant. You get a plant in your house, you immediately think, okay, this is the specific type of plant, so it needs a certain level of water, a certain amount of sun. New Yorkers are very keen to that because we don't have yards, and we don't have, just like, normally you just put it outside and nature takes care of it. But it's like, I've got limited sunshine. I only got sunshine in the first few hours of the morning, or the water that it takes, etc. And so based on the specific plant that it is, it needs a certain level of, stuff to survive. And so similarly for ourselves, as long as we identify with whatever material role we're playing, we feel we need a certain things to fall in place in order to be happy. And Krishna is just calling all of us to rethink that. And that's a lot of where these verses of the nature of the soul is coming. It's not just saying, oh, that's good to know, I'm an eternal soul, etc. It's like, no, I want you to use this information so that you can rethink your formula for happiness, and rethink what you think it means to live a successful life. Because you go back to the first chapter, Arjuna is saying, this will happen, this will happen, this will happen. It's like, yeah, that's a problem because you have a certain conception of what success and happiness looks like. So.
Yes. We could continue this conversation because it's so good. I really love, Dayal, how you put it into context of like, it's not that Krishna is just giving like high and lofty philosophy. It's actually, it's like a he's calling us. He's calling Arjuna, and he's calling us to like understand what is real, like what is actually real. The Vedas define what is real by that which is eternal, and what is illusion by that which is temporary. And if we look at these definitions, it's like, wait a minute, all this other stuff that you're getting into, all of that stuff is temporary. It's all going to go away, And so therefore, like, how can we, the most fundamental thing, it's not a lofty idea. The most fundamental thing is, how do we connect back to the place of the soul? How do I start to identify as a spirit soul? Not just know it, And so it's really fascinating that he starts with this. But we're running fresh out of time. And so we are going to hand it over to Kimberly to give us our takeaways. And if anyone else has any takeaways, please put them in the chat. Kimberly, what you got for us today?
Hit us.
Thank you. So today we're walking away with to broaden our perspective, to take things back to the most fundamental reality. That knowledge is to know that knowledge is to know that spirit, matter, and the controller of both, and to take away to rethink our formula for happiness.
Beautiful. What about you, Dayal? What are you taking away today?
Rethink my formula for happiness. What are all the things that I'm doing that I think are going to make me happy?
That's what I'm taking away too. It was so good the way that you put it, Kimberly. Rethinking our formula for happiness. That's something that, and I think it's like almost like a daily practice. Like I was saying, it's like, oh, I took it from Dayal. Beautiful. It's like a daily practice because, like I was mentioning earlier, it's like we're so hardwired into thinking that like this is what's going to make me happy, and so almost like rewiring our mind to change our perspective on happiness. I'm walking away with today. Okie dokie, folks. Thank you all so much for being here today. We appreciate every one of you, our live audience, and anyone out there who's listening to this recording. We will be here tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. Thank you all. Thank you so much, Dayal. And hopefully we'll have our Achyuta Gopi with us tomorrow. We shall see, and we're happy to be back. Thank you all so much, and see you soon. Bye, folks.